The raindrops splash down quickly on the empty LA streets. The moon shines bright in the sky as you make your way through the dark alleys. The neon signs light up the pavement, advertising pawn shops open late and vibrant nightclubs. But these names are just a front for what really happens in the shadows. Your hunger for blood crawls up in your throat like a beast clawing its way out from the inside. What do you do? This question is posed both to the players of the TTRPG that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is based on, and the video game itself. Bloodlines is a translation of the pen and paper RPG that it takes its name from. While incredibly faithful in recreating the world of the original game and sticking to the systems that were present there, it only leaves out the chaff. Effectively a condensed localization, a faithful but unique extension of Vampire the Masquerade, so much so that many claim it must be played as a gateway into that world. The characters and story that it would introduce would also become canon to the pen and paper RPG almost immediately. But more than that, Bloodlines is one of the best written role-playing games ever made. Some of this comes from the world that the tabletop game created. Surely the developers were working with a sturdy foundation, but the characters that they created, the choices they introduced, and the world that they brought to life is second to none. More than that, it's not just the choices that you make, but the things that you say and why you say them. Sure, second playthroughs may have similar cutscenes, missions, and conversations, but the intent of the player changes with the character that you create. Are you telling someone you won't work for them because you are a Bruja aligned with the Anarchs? Or are you telling them you won't work for them because you're simply out for your own personal gain and don't want a watcher breathing down your neck? This doesn't mean that Bloodlines railroads you into making specific choices or approaching things the same way every time, but most of the choices in the game are made for flavor. Some have consequences, but the perception of the choices that don't is what makes this game special. So much so that I was overcome with a great melancholy when I finished the game. As the barely visible credits rolled up the screen and I watched a tower burn against the night sky, I realized that I would never play something like Bloodlines again. A sentiment shared seemingly by some of the people that worked on the game as well, only with its creation. When Brian Mitsoda, lead writer on VTM Bloodlines, was asked what the best and worst parts about writing the game were, of the worst, he said, "Writing a project like Bloodlines and realizing for the rest of your career, you probably won't get to write anything like Bloodlines." But that isn't entirely the whole story. Bloodlines has been hailed as a flawed masterpiece for years, a cult classic that was released too early in its development cycle, that was rushed out of the door by publishers, but also a game that was just far too ahead of its time to be truly appreciated. I hesitate to call the game a flawed masterpiece. Sure, in 2004, you could have given the game that moniker as, on release, it was sometimes barely playable, full of bugs that could either crash your game or, as escapist writer Joe Blancato stated in his 2006 article about the rise and fall of Troika Games, it could blow up your PC. That didn't stop him and many others from getting the game again, though, and forcing their way to the other side of this masterpiece. Now, 21 years removed from the release of Bloodlines, I think it's just safe to call it a masterpiece at this point. Decades of dedicated fans have resurrected this cold, dead body from its grave, embracing the project that they loved and giving it a second life. I want to call Bloodlines a masterpiece because I don't think a game has to be perfect to deserve that title. And Bloodlines, even with the years of fixes, restored content, and unofficial patches, still has its problems. But I promise you that you will play nothing like this game ever again. You get one shot at it, so don't mess it up. With the shoddy release of the sequel recently, I decided it was the perfect time to revisit this game. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'll be taking a look at Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, discussing everything from gameplay to mechanics to story and every patched up wound in between. If you enjoy the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel as it really helps me out. You can also head over to my Patreon in the description if you'd like to support the channel further. I upload monthly media reports talking about every piece of media I consumed that month and review movies based on games from time to time. Spoilers ahead. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I'd like to talk about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. To talk about Bloodlines, we first need to talk about Troika Games. Troika Games was formed by three people, Tim Kaine, Leonard Boyarsky, and Jason Anderson. All of them were key figures working at Interplay, specifically on the original Fallout game. Kaine was a programmer, and Boyarsky and Anderson were both credited as artists. After finishing a design for Fallout 2, the three had seen the writing on the wall and decided to leave to start their own studio, Troika Games. Interplay had been a great place to work, and we felt that it was losing a lot of what we felt was great about it, and that they were making a lot of bad decisions that would destroy the company. We were about 5 or 6 years early on that, but we saw the writing on the wall. If Baldur's Gate hadn't hit big, Interplay might well have imploded much earlier, but we left about a year before BG was even released. At Troika Games, the team found the freedom and general creativity that they had started to yearn for again at Interplay. All three of them served as co-CEOs, with Tim being the programmer, Leonard being the artist, and Anderson serving a bit of both roles, the glue in between that artists and programmers so often need. After they formed the company, they began work on their first game, Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. After doing planning and concept work for 5 months, they secured a publisher in Sierra Online. This allowed them to get 12 employees, which helped things a bit, but the crew always felt like they were in crunch mode because of the size of their team. They were hoping to stay with one publisher, to get some loyalty under their belt and ideally work with someone who shared their visions. But after Sierra were acquired, there was cutbacks and the whole situation got messy. So after Arcanum released in 2001, they had to seek out new publishers. They began developing their next and final 2 games almost immediately. Kaine and his team were working on the Temple of Elemental Evil for Atari, and the rest of the crew began development on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines for Activision. This would change in 2003 when Activision, upset with the lengthy development cycle, would shove more money at Troika so they could finish Temple of Elemental Evil and move everyone over to Bloodlines. In the beginning, though, the project was intriguing. Troika secured Activision as a publisher, they secured the rights to Vampire the Masquerade from White Wolf. Things were going smoothly, but the project would be nothing but a disaster after about a month. Scott Lynch of Valve approached the team to show them their new source engine they were developing. Troika was incredibly impressed with the technology, especially in the facial animations and the physics department. Their general idea for Bloodlines at this time was to try and push the RPG into the next generation, a true 3D RPG, ditching the top-down or isometric looks they had worked with in the past. The source engine was perfect for this, but it also created a lot of their woes. The engine was still in development, and they had a ton of issues with it when creating the game. On top of that, Activision hadn't assigned them a producer for the first year that they were working, so the team was woefully disorganized. By the time David Mulek had been assigned to Bloodlines, entire levels had been finished and thrown away, the multiplayer feature that they had planned was completely broken, on and on and on it goes. They started to get things straightened out, but Bloodlines was an incredibly complex project, and only a few years into development, Activision were pushing deadlines and asking Troika for a release. The team has all stated that the development was incredibly difficult, and it was one of the rockiest games that they worked on. I don't want to get too specific about how easy or difficult this game has been, but I'm now bald. Arcanum had about a year of non-crunch time, and Vampire had about 1 or 2 months. I am not kidding. The team was rushing to try and get the game out the door, but still couldn't meet Activision's deadlines. The publisher finally had to set a hard date and gave the team a few weeks to bug test the game. Activision did some testing and determined it was good enough for release, but the game couldn't release until after Half-Life 2 because Valve couldn't debut their new engine with another company's game. So this gave the team some more time to work on bugs, but a lot of the team members at this point were working without salary only because they believed in the project so much. It still wasn't enough though, because Bloodlines was very buggy and broken on release. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines was released on November 16, 2004 in North America and on November 19, 2004 in the EU, both for Microsoft Windows. One of the team members stated that they didn't think there was a safe week to release the game in 2004. Just for context, Half-Life 2 released the same month as Bloodlines. In fact, Bloodlines released just days after Half-Life 2. Doom 3, GTA San Andreas, Prince of Persia: The Warrior Within, Metal Gear Solid 3, Gran Turismo 4, Halo 2, Star Wars Battlefront, KOTOR 2, Thief Deadly Shadows, and World of Warcraft all came out in 2004. They might have made an accurate assessment there. Bloodlines begins with an introduction. After we create our character, which we'll get into in a moment, we see our new kindred as they're turned into a vampire after a night of passion. Quickly after awakening, you are stabbed through the heart with a stake and taken to a large theater. A man they call the Prince gives a speech to the crowd. Here he states that laws have been broken, that no one is to sire a kindred, meaning to create a new vampire, without his permission. The punishment for this is death, and the woman is beheaded, giving her final death. As he is about to pass his sentence on our newly created character, he is interrupted as a man from the crowd speaks up and objects.
Their responsibility, and most importantly, the laws they must obey. Therefore, I have decided that
this is bullshit!
This seemingly changes the prince's mind, and he decides to spare our life. Since the prince spared our life, he is now responsible for us, and determines that we must pay him back for this service with a bit of labor, a trial of sorts. We are sent to Santa Monica to meet a man named Mercurio. Before we can do that, though, we meet another man outside, Smiling Jack. Jack is a bit of a chaotic bastard, but he serves as a perfect introduction to this world. If being a vampire is the underworld, then Smiling Jack is our Charon, helping us cross the river Styx to get to the other side. But this Charon doesn't really require payment. He's doing us a favor, giving us the bare bones of what it means to be a kindred, which our character isn't even aware of at this point. Usually in this world, this role is fulfilled by a sire, one that turns a human into a vampire, the act of which is called the embrace. While Jack introduces us to the world, he also introduces us to the mechanics of the game. He teaches you to feed, sneak, pick up objects, and to fight. During this introduction, we can hear gunshots, and it seems like the shit has started to hit the fan. A rival faction named the Sabbat have shown up to raid the place, and Jack helps us sneak out and even fight a few of them so we can make it through our first night alive. We also see the sheriff, the prince's enforcer and right-hand man, dispense with a few of them using seemingly endless power. We eventually sneak through a warehouse and are introduced to our disciplines, take out some goons, and are ready to head to Santa Monica to start our first job for the prince. Before we get into the first area of the game, it's probably a good idea that I talk about the game's systems more generally and introduce you to some of the lore of the world. Beginning Bloodlines requires creating a character. The first choice here is what clan we will be a part of. There are 7 playable clans in the game, taken from the 7 Camarilla clans in the TTRPG. These are Brujah, Gangrel, Malkavian, Nosferatu, Toreador, Tremere, and Ventru. Now, for context, I did not have much knowledge of the TTRPG before starting research for this video. Because of that, I started to extensively dig into the rulebook, company history, lore, etc., to try and find out as much as I could about Vampire the Masquerade. This was an indulgence that I had thinly veiled as research for the video, and I will now dump most of that information onto you so that I do not have to be burdened with it anymore. Vampire the Masquerade has gone through a lot of different revisions and editions. The original first edition was released in 1991 by White Wolf Publishing. This was quickly followed in 1992 by the second edition and the revised edition in 1998. There were two other editions, the 20th anniversary edition in 2011 and the newest and most current edition, 5th edition, in 2018. The problem with looking at modern Vampire the Masquerade for this video is that Bloodlines was not based on modern VTM rulebooks, and 5th edition actually retcons a lot of lore and changes things for the meta plot of the game, meaning the overarching story of the role-playing game. I will be talking more about 5th edition when I talk about the sequel in a separate video, but that's for later. Bloodlines was mostly based on 2nd edition and revised. I mostly read the revised texts for this video because it had been the most current version of the game when Bloodlines started development, and Boyarsky himself said that he researched heavily both the 2nd edition and revised books for the game, so I figured either would be a decent enough introduction to the world and systems. I also just want to state this here, I am not a lore expert on VTM, and also if something I state here is contradicted by 5th edition, don't worry, I'll get into that in the video about the game's sequel. Also, if I get something wrong about the revised or 2nd edition lore, let me know in the comments, just be gentle. In the actual TTRPG, there are 13 total clans. 7 of these clans appear as playable clans in Bloodlines. 2 of the other clans, the Zemisi, which is kind of unclear on how to pronounce that word because it's pronounced differently in the game and the TTRPG, and some actual plays I found pronounce it differently as well. I'm just going to say Zemisi because that's what the TTRPG says. And the Giovanni actually appear in the game as brief characters, but the other 4 clans, namely the Lasombra, Assamites, now known as the Banu Hakim, Followers of Set, now known as the Ministry, and the Ravnos do not appear in the game at all. Before we get into the clans and their specificities, a bit of a lore history lesson is in store. In the world of Vampire the Masquerade, little is distinctly known about the history of vampires. Most of it is legend, rumor, and myth. No one has definitive proof that certain events occurred. We only know what stories have been passed down. That's part of the fun, though, because you never really know what's true and what's legend. But as the legends go, Cain, the biblical Cain, after murdering his brother Abel, was cursed by God. He met Lilith, and she took him in for a period. Shortly after this, the angels, Uriel, Raphael, and Michael, approached Cain, telling him to beg for God's forgiveness. He refused, and one by one, he was set upon with a variety of curses that would eventually transform him into something quite like the kindred that we know now. An unquenchable thirst for blood, a revulsion to sunlight, essentially immortality outside of some more dangerous wounds, so on and so forth. After he was cursed, Lilith began teaching him a variety of disciplines. These disciplines are the powers and abilities that the different clans still know today, and we'll get into those in a moment. Cain eventually found the first city, Enoch, and made it his home. His impressive curse was seen as godlike by the people, and he was quickly made king. But with no one to relate to, he eventually grew lonely. Cain then made his first children, or childer, as they're referred to in VTM. Cain's childer were the 2nd generation of vampires, and their names are said to be Enoch, Zillah, and Elad. To create a new vampire, a kindred must give a human what is called the embrace. This involves sucking their blood dry and then giving them a small taste of their own blood to replace it. This creates a new vampire, normally of the same clan that the sire was a part of. Cain's children quickly began to embrace more childer, and the city was overrun with kindred. This once again spurned God's wrath, bringing about the Great Flood. This killed a lot of the kindred and most of the mortals, and took out the first city. This caused Cain to go into a self-imposed exile. While he was gone, the 3rd generation, which most kindred refer to as the Antediluvians, slew their sires, the 2nd generation. The third generation were the only remaining founders of their clans at this point, each with their own tics, personality types, skills, and flaws. There is a lot more history here that I could go into. The situation with Carthage, the Dark Ages, the Inquisition, etc. And in fact, Vampire the Masquerade, while incredibly deep and complex, is just one part of a larger series called the World of Darkness. This series contains Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Hunter the Reckoning, Mage the Ascension, Mummy the Resurrection, Demon the Fallen, Wraith the Oblivion, and Changeling the Dreaming. There is another separate reboot/reimagining that was released called Chronicles of Darkness, which are alternative spins on all of these properties, but we don't need to talk about that until later. If you're interested in more of this complex lore, I'd recommend going and checking it out because it's all super interesting. For now, all you need to know is that as the years passed, more and more generations of vampires were sired. And eventually, with mostly chaos in reign, a group of clans decided that it would be a good idea to create some sort of very light governing body that would ensure there were rules that kindred needed to follow and enforce those rules. This group was called the Camarilla, and the thing they were looking to introduce and uphold was the Masquerade. The Camarilla is a group of clans, essentially, that have determined that there are 6 traditions all kindred must follow. The first, the Masquerade, attempts to hide the existence of vampires from the wider populace. This essentially means don't do anything out in public where mortals can see that would let them know that you are a vampire. Don't feed, don't use conspicuous powers, and don't tell anyone about vampires. In the game, this is a tradition we must follow. We have a certain amount of Masquerade points, and if we lose all of our Masquerade points, we lose the game. If you want to feed, you have to do it in the shadows. The second tradition concerns the domain. If entering another kindred's domain, you must respect it. The third tradition, progeny, states that you cannot sire a kindred without the permission of an elder. This is essentially what your sire at the beginning of the game is killed for, breaking this tradition. The fourth tradition, the accounting, deals with siring a child. When you embrace someone, they start out as a fledgling. A sire is supposed to teach his child the ways and traditions of a kindred, show them the ropes, essentially, until they become a neonate, which is sort of another rank of vampire. They are their sire's responsibility. The fifth tradition, hospitality, determines that you must present yourself to the baron or prince of that specific city when arriving. Our character will have to do this many times throughout the course of the game. And the final tradition, the destruction, determines that elders, older vampires, are the only ones who can destroy another kindred. Essentially, if you're an average younger kindred, you cannot destroy other kindred, and only certain people can call blood hunts. A blood hunt is an extraneous circumstance that a ruler in a certain area can only take if a kindred is completely breaking the rules. It's essentially open season on that person. Every kindred in the area is given permission to kill the one who has been blood hunted. The Camarilla is a group of 7 clans that we talked about before. Interestingly, though, the Camarilla considers every kindred a part of their organization. So if you're found breaking the rules, they will kill you regardless of if you're in a different clan or not. Speaking of clans, like I said before, these are essentially vampiric bloodlines. If you're sired by a Tremere, for example, then you will become a Tremere and gain their abilities and temperament. And if you're sired by a Malkavian, then God help you. Let's go through the clans that the game presents. The Brujah are seen as punks and rebels to those outside of the clan, but their true intent is generally social change. They rebel against the system and are not complacent with the current status quo. The Anarchs, a movement we'll get into later, but which basically rebels against the Camarilla, have more Brujah members than all of the other clans combined. The Brujah have access to 3 disciplines in Bloodlines, just like the other clans. These are Celerity, Potence, and Presence. Disciplines are like small powers that you can use by spending blood points. Your blood bar, displayed on the right-hand side of the screen, can be filled by feeding, either on humans or animals, though feeding on animals doesn't give you much blood and is generally frowned upon. You won't be breaking any rules by doing it, but it's just kind of seen as gross. Different humans give you different amounts of blood, though. Humans who are ill will make you sick. Humans who are drunk will make you drunk as well. A person that doesn't take good care of themselves might give less blood points than someone who runs every day and eats incredibly healthy food. Celerity allows you to increase your speed, basically slowing the entire world down around you for a short period. Potence gives you supernatural brawl and melee attacks for a period of time, and Presence affects characters near to the player. They can be mesmerized at higher levels, but at all levels they suffer some sort of penalty to their strength, wits, and perception, meaning they're probably going to do less damage. Gangrel, the second clan, are a bit outwardly similar to the Brujah. They don't exactly follow the status quo either, but it isn't because they're rebelling against the systems, but because they are closer to nature. They resemble beasts in posture, they often survive more in the wild, and they mostly prefer solitude. The Gangrel have access to the Animalism, Fortitude, and Protean disciplines. Animalism at different levels gives you the ability to summon different animals to attack your foes, ghostly bats, insect swarms, or even beetles. Fortitude adds 1 point to all soak feats, which determine how much damage you can basically shrug off without getting hurt. Protean basically gives the user heat vision at certain levels, but higher upgrades will allow the player to just change into a war form that looks like a bat and does a ton of damage. The Toreador are essentially artists or enjoyers of art. Most of them were artists, poets, or musicians in life. The tragic thing with these kindred is that often people embrace them to ensure that their creative gifts are forever protected from death. But when a human is embraced, they essentially lose their ability to create or innovate things. The only works they can muster are derivative, so this becomes essentially an eternity of watching from the outside looking in. But above all, Toreador are passionate about everything they do. Whatever a Toreador does, she does with passion. Whatever a Toreador is, she is with passion. The Toreador has access to Auspex, Celerity, and Presence. We've already talked about Celerity and Presence, but Auspex gives you the ability to notice creatures from a distance, and it briefly adds more to your Wits score, which will allow you to see objects in the environment. The Tremere are a strange beast, a clan built on the backs of blood magic or vampiric sorcery. According to legend, they came about when some wizards enacted a ritual over the body of a sleeping antediluvian. They took his vampirism and embraced through their own new clan. They are incredibly paranoid, especially because they believe, because of their creation, that they have many enemies in the Camarilla, and they're probably right. Tremere has access to Auspex, Dominate, and Thaumaturgy. Dominate allows the user to send enemies into a trance, either sicking them on their friends or just instantly killing them. Thaumaturgy allows you to summon blood projectiles that can be fired at your enemies. The Ventru are business people through and through. They are descended from merchant princes, nobles, general wielders of power. From time out of mind, Ventru has been the clan of leadership, enforcing the ancient traditions and seeking to shape the destiny of the kindred. You can imagine how the Ventru might clash with some of the other clans like the Brujah or the Gangrel. Ventru have access to the Dominate, Fortitude, and Presence disciplines. Now, there are 2 other clans that I haven't talked about. The 5 that I have discussed are what I call beginner clans. These are probably your best bet to have a basic, relatively normal experience of the game on your first go-around. Then, on your second playthrough, you can try one of the other 2 clans that are a bit less straightforward. The Malkavians have cursed blood, which makes all of them essentially insane or raving mad. This is implied to be because they can see the true world, meaning they see what's really going on, but can't quite exactly put it into words that others can understand. But most convincingly, the Malkavians are free from the confines of rationality and may do whatever they like, and this freedom is coupled with an uncanny insight and strange wisdom that cannot be perceived by the sane. In-game, this is reflected with entirely different dialogue options than any of the other clans. Of course, if you're Tremere or Gangrel, there will be some certain choices you can make throughout the game, but the Malkavians can't even interface with a conversation normally. They speak in riddles and constantly say strange things that no one else understands. As soon as you start your playthrough, you're greeted with everyone either laughing or disappointed at the raw deal you just got by being accepted into this clan.
What? Oh, man. And you're a goddamn Malkavian, too. Wow. You really are fucked.
Oh, damn! You're talking all this crazy shit! Oh, man! I bet that means you're Malkavian, huh? I know a little about you guys. Your heads are, like, messed up, right? Like Hannibal Lecter crazy, know what I'm saying?
This is a completely unique playthrough from choosing Brujah, Gangrel, or Toreador, etc., and obviously required the writers to ensure that they were always writing an entirely different set of dialogue for every single encounter in the game, an insane level of work. The Malkavians have access to the Auspex, Dementation, and Obfuscate disciplines. Dementation seemingly allows for the spread of the Malkavians' insanity, briefly turning their targets insane and in higher tiers, full-on killing them instantly. Obfuscate is the ability to turn oneself invisible, extremely useful for stealth, sneaking, and the next clan that we're going to talk about. The Nosferatu are cursed with an incredible disfigurement. This is said to have happened because the clan's founder was specifically cursed for some sort of misdeed, but no one is sure. The Nosferatu, unlike the other clans, look grotesque, bat-like, warped, long ears, bald heads, teeth jutting out, etc. Because of this, they are not allowed to openly walk in public like the rest of the clans. They have to stick to the sewers, and many of them live in sanctuaries underground. The Nosferatu are often masters of irony as well, selectively choosing progeny, that's humans to be embraced, that are particularly beautiful or vain. But because the Nosferatu have gotten such a raw deal, they often are incredibly easy to deal with and have a strong loyalty to each other, since the mortal world has fully cast them out. In-game, this is reflected by the player not being able to show up in public. As a Nosferatu, you have to primarily use the sewers as a means of travel. The Nosferatu have access to Animalism, Obfuscate, and Potence. Obfuscate is a huge ability to have here because it means that we can walk among populated areas when we need to, at least, as long as we have the blood to do so. We just can't appear in public or we lose a masquerade point. But what a tortured existence to not be able to be seen in public for fear of breaking the rules of your own society. A lot of the clans look down on the Nosferatu as well, generally freaked out by them, rejected by the mortal world and the kindred at the same time. For my first playthrough, I chose a Toreador. I like this clan because they're one of the clans that are closest to the mortal world. Those kindred are the most interesting to me, the ones still clawing back their humanity even when cursed with unlife. Instead of embracing their other side, they try to split the difference and stay somewhere in between. They're also one of the simplest introductions to the world of VTM because you aren't running around saying exclusively insane things or traversing the sewers just yet. After choosing your clan, you can create the rest of your character. The Bloodlines character sheet is very similar to the TTRPG version. It's split up into 4 sections: attributes, abilities, disciplines, and feats. The disciplines we've already talked about, but the feats are essentially our end statistics: lockpicking, sneaking, persuasion, haggle, etc. All of the skills are the ones that we're going to use in the actual world. Lockpicking will determine how difficult of a lock we can crack. Melee combat will determine how effective we are using hand-to-hand weapons. And persuasion will determine how effective we are at convincing other people to do things we want them to. The rating of these skills are all determined by our attribute and ability skills, so increasing our computer, for example, will increase our hacking. Or increasing our intimidation will add 1 to our intimidate. All of these feats can reach a maximum of 10, and they generally have 2 skills that affect their rating. Dexterity will add 1 to stealth and lockpicking, but security also adds 1 to lockpicking. The nice thing about this screen is that hovering over a feat will show what skills or attributes affect it. Most of these skills are generally self-explanatory, so I won't go through all of them. In the game, we can lockpick doors or safes, we can hack computers, we can affect people in conversation. Depending on your skill and the related feats, sometimes you will get a blue, pink, or green option in conversation. These are persuasion, seduction, or intimidate options, respectively. These allow you to affect other characters in the game, either convincing them to do something you want, seducing them into giving you what you want, or scaring them into doing what you want. These can change the outcomes of quests, often making things easier for your character or giving you more rewards for completing something. Leveling up most of these skills requires getting experience, which comes from completing quest objectives, not from killing enemies. And these skills all require higher experience to level up as they increase. You can obtain some skill books in the world from vendors and various characters. These are essentially free skill points, but you often need your research skill to be high enough to use these. Perhaps the most interesting thing included on the character sheet, though, is the humanity rating. Humanity is a direct reflection of how much or little the beast has taken over you. This is what truly makes being a vampire in this world such a horrific thing. You are constantly fighting the beast inside, the ethereal presence within yourself that's always scraping to get out, the thing that tells you the masquerade means nothing, and you must feed on whatever is closest, the thing telling you that the people you've met don't matter, that the innocents' lives are forfeit to you, the thing inside that's telling you to throw it all away and just give in. Humanity is increased or decreased based on your actions in the game. Saving an innocent's life in the course of a side quest, that increases your humanity. Sacrificing that innocent to help out a fellow kindred, that decreases your humanity. We'll get more into this concept later, but for now, the revised core rulebook puts it nicely. Not only do vampires hide from mortals, they hide from themselves as well, pretending they are not the horrors they have truly become. While there are still important mechanics to visit and important concepts that have not yet been introduced, it's probably time that we start with the game's first area, Santa Monica. For some clarity, I've separated this review into 4 distinct areas, the areas that the game puts you in and lets you play. In each area, I will first talk about the main story, using my initial first playthrough, the male Toreador named Jacob, as a framework, and then I will talk about all of the extra circular activities that you can get into in that area. When you arrive in Santa Monica, you awake in your haven. A kindred's haven is their home, but also it's a special sort of place. It needs to be isolated enough for one to sleep during the day with no questions asked, but also one needs to ensure that they won't be disturbed during the day with, say, the opening of some curtains, because that could be disastrous. Jacob's Haven is a small corner apartment above a pawn shop in Santa Monica. Waking up here, you'll see a small note on the table from Mercurio, giving you the password to your computer and telling you to meet him at his apartment when you're ready to take on the job that the prince is asking you to do. You can inspect your computer and flip through some emails. Aside from spam advertisements for strange pills, you get a message from LaCroix also telling you to visit Mercurio, a message from the man himself again giving you directions to his apartment, and a strange message from a sender called a friend stating the game begins, a pawn is moved. How mysterious. In the Haven, we can watch the nightly news to learn about a serial killer who has run amok, as well as some other interesting happenings around the world. As a small aside, the voice actor for the newscaster is actually the lead writer of the game, Brian Mitsoda. And interestingly, this newscast, like the entire skybox for the game, is just a projection from another object, meaning that if you no-clip out of the world, you can actually find the newscaster's room off in the distance. There's a fantastic series on YouTube by a creator called Little Dwarf that has a ton of these technical Easter eggs and details from the game that I would highly recommend checking out if you're interested. While in the apartment, we can also listen to a nightly radio program called Deb of Night, hosted by the sultry Deb, who takes calls from some unique listeners.
Up way past your bedtime, aren't you? Hope you've slipped into something comfortable. I know I have. If you're new to town or just new to this whole radio thing, you're listening to the Deb of Night.
Outside on a neighbor's doorstep, we can see an issue of the LA Sun, the late edition, that details the gruesome carnival of death, leaving bodies slashed up on the pier. Heading to Mercurio's, we can find a trail of blood leading into his apartment. The man quickly tells us that he was beaten up, quite viciously, by some chemists on the beach. They were supposed to be procuring some explosives for him, but they kicked the crap out of him instead and took his money. So, of course, as will become standard for the rest of the game, we are sent to go deal with it. Mercurio isn't exactly a vampire, he's a ghoul. A ghoul is someone who has not been embraced, but been fed vampire blood. The blood will give them a small fraction of the powers that kindred are given, but only for a period of time. If the blood is fed to them too much, they will become completely enthralled with the kindred's blood they were given, and the substance can be quite addictive to mortals. Heading down to the beach, we can talk to some shirtless surfers by the pier who direct us to the chemists hanging out in a building nearby. We can either take these guys head on, or sneak in the back and take them out silently, or just grab the astrolite and get out of there. The levels in Bloodlines are often constructed to give the player multiple methods of approach. This is done to accommodate many different builds. If you make a level that requires stealth, then players that have not put any points into those types of skills would be up for quite a difficult time. So as much as the game can, it attempts to create paths through levels that allow you to get the most use out of your chosen build. Taking the astrolite back to Mercurio, we can learn about its purpose. We're supposed to use it to blow a warehouse outside of the city, sky high. The problem is, we need to contact someone named Bertrand Tongue, and he is hiding right now. He is currently feuding with someone else in the city, a woman named Therese Vorman. Both of them are sort of struggling for power in Santa Monica, and Tongue believes that Therese has sent people to kill him, hence the hiding. So, in the interest of getting to Tongue, we need to visit Therese and try to get her to settle her differences with him, or at least call off the hit. Santa Monica isn't a very large area. None of the areas in the city are, in fact. They are slices of one or a few small city blocks, a collection of a few streets and buildings and businesses, a microcosm of what you would call a realistic city at large. But that doesn't really matter, because these small areas are densely packed with quests and activities, people to talk to, things to see, business to take care of. Santa Monica has its first main block, a small street that contains the pawn shop and our apartment building above it. Mercurio's apartment is next door, and down the street, a small parking lot where homeless people and prostitutes seem to gather. On the other side of the street, a medical clinic, a gallery, and a parking garage. We can head through the parking garage to access the next street. Here, a small diner and a large nightclub called Asylum that we'll have to head to soon. The parking garage can be taken to the beach, or we can take a side street away from the nightclub to find a few more businesses, a junkyard, an oil yard, and a bail bondsman. Every single business I listed is accessible in the game and either has some sort of side quest associated with it, if not 2 or 3. If no side quests are associated with them, then they generally have some sort of important NPC that we must talk to, some sort of item that we need to get, information to gather. The team was incredibly efficient with level design, meaning that almost every inch of this place is used well. There's purpose here and intent. This does lead to some unintended consequences, like the player sort of feeling as if the city is too small or too connected, like it's too convenient that the bail bondsman's bounty hunter lives right across the hall from Mercurio. There should be some empty places here, some buildings that just don't serve a purpose for our story, or that don't have anything in them. At the end of the day, though, this is just a consequence of budget and time. In the modern day, we have the power and money to make massive, bustling cities, but none of them are quite full, like Bloodlines is. Our next main quest, seeking out Therese Vorman, leads us to the nightclub in Santa Monica, Asylum, that is run by her and her sister. And finally, here, we can dance. Free your inhibitions. Let no man's scorn fall upon that which is righteous. These sick moves. Anyway, Asylum is a gathering point for a lot of folks, mostly human, those looking to dance or drink the night away. As we enter the building, though, we will quickly meet Jeanette Vorman, Therese's sister and business partner, and she is sultry.
I'm the finger down your spine when all the lights are out, and the name on all the men's room walls. When I pout, the whole world tries to make me smile, and everyone always wants to know who is that girl.
She steps off to go handle some business, and we can talk to the bartender who directs us upstairs to Therese's quarters. Before entering, we can hear Therese and Jeanette arguing.
Oh, Therese, you really do paint a flattering portrait of me with your turn-of-the-century barb. I always assumed you could do nothing but look down on me. Just the sight of you.
Entering the room, Jeanette is gone, and we can finally speak to Therese, mostly without issue. While Jeanette is sort of unruly, a bit chaotic, and a lot seductive, Therese is her complete opposite. Though the sisters are twins, they mirror each other in almost every way. Therese is more composed, thoughtful, and intimidating, while her sister tends to use personal charm to get what she wants. Jeanette dresses in skimpy clothes with her hair in pigtails, and Therese wears glasses, a suit, and her hair up in a bun. The two often conflict each other in their territory, arguing over matters of turf and influence. But getting to the matter at hand, Therese says that she doesn't have a hit out on Bertrand Tongue. He's actually in a self-imposed exile. The whole thing was just rumor. She doesn't want us to kill him either. She prefers him where he is, squirming and on the run. This further displays Therese's personality, a schemer and willing to make political moves out of any situation. The primary reason that she doesn't like Tongue is because he has been ruining her chance at a piece of property in the area. She is willing to put out the word that she isn't looking for Bertrand's head if we manage to help her out with another property she's looking to invest in. The Ocean House Hotel is supposedly haunted by a spirit. In theory, taking a personal item of the ghost's may excise it from the location, so she wants us to head there and get rid of the spirit for her. A favor for a favor. This begins one of the most lauded and probably best missions in Bloodlines. The mission at Ocean House is essentially a short horror game where we wander through this hotel, constantly attacked, assaulted, and taunted by spirits. Slowly, you uncover what happened here. A father murdered his family years ago, and their spirits have been left to wander this place in eternal torment. You'll be sent down to the basement through collapsing stairs, harassed by the flickering of lights and paintings that fly off the wall at you. And this feels like a bit of standard fare for today, but in 2004, this almost feels like a revolutionary idea. One mission that's entirely horror, where you don't really fight or interact with anything. The epitome of a haunted house, because it literally is. And it's pretty damn scary too. Most of the jump scares got me, and the atmosphere throughout the whole thing is top notch. The sound design is doing a lot of the heavy lifting as well, but eventually we can grab the memento from the Ocean House and head back to Asylum. Unfortunately though, when we arrive, Jeanette is here and Therese is gone. She begs and pleads for us to give her the memento, as she'll just deliver it directly to Therese for us. She frames it as if she's taking something off of our hands for us, but we know this isn't true. Whether we give the memento to Jeanette or not will affect how angry Therese will be with us when we see her next, because regardless, she's going to be angry with us after the next mission. While Jeanette begs for us to give her the memento, we learn a lot about the rift between these two sisters. Jeanette feels that she's treated like a child. She's harassed and bullied and scrutinized by her own sister daily.
She's always belittling me. She's the smart one. She's the favorite. She's the successful one. Well, it's not fair. I'm not a fool. This club's success is just as much my doing as it is hers.
Of course, now Jeanette wants us to do something for her while we're waiting for Therese to get back. Jeanette wants us to head down to the local gallery to slash up some paintings. Heading there, we can either sneak and break in, or we can convince the officer standing by, a man named Officer Chunk, that we'll see a lot of later, to let us in. Inside, we can destroy the paintings, but they must be slashed in a particular order. This moment in the game is interesting, and is something I want to praise Bloodlines for a little bit. So remember that lore dump that I gave you earlier about Cain and how the vampires were created and all the rules of vampire society? Well, none of that information is given to the player. And chances are when you boot up Bloodlines for the first time, you'll have no idea about all of this past history and rumor. Bloodlines does an incredible job at slowly inserting you into this world, giving you information bit by bit, but also at the same time, this information is delivered to you by NPCs. These NPCs all mostly have their own skew and perspective on the information. So instead of just being a lore dump, it's actually also telling us more about the character that is talking to us. We'll talk about this more when we get to the downtown section of the game, but for now, we have to slash these paintings in order, which all depict a part of Cain being cursed, subtly introducing the idea of VTM lore to the player. When we do this, though, we accidentally somehow summon a Blood Guardian. This is our first sort of boss in the game, and taking it out is pretty simple. Most of the boss fights in this game, outside of the final 1 or 2, don't really have mechanics. I haven't really talked too much about combat, so what better place to tackle that than right now? Combat in Vampire the Masquerade is either melee focused or ranged. Your ability to do damage with either of these is obviously associated with their respective ratings on your character sheet. Melee combat is generally done with a variety of weapons or just your good old fists. We can use fire axes, swords, clubs, tire irons, etc. These all come with their own stats and damage ratings. And then there's ranged combat, which can be done with all manner of guns, a small .38 pistol, a flamethrower, a shotgun, you name it. Both parts of combat are wonky at best, sort of clunky bits of mechanics all chunked together to create some weird amalgamation of something. Many people have railed on the combat, deriding it as the weakest part of the game, and I would say out of everything, sure, it's the weakest. But once you get used to it, it really isn't that bad. The part I would complain about the most with combat is the balance. It honestly feels like both systems are sort of weak in different halves of the game. It feels like melee is really good in the beginning, but once you get towards the end, it doesn't do as much. You can still push your way through with it, but it becomes a lot more slow. Melee combat in general is a bit clunky. You do a sort of 3-hit combo, which is different for a lot of the weapons in the game. I figured out pretty early on, though, if you time your hits correctly, you can forego this combo and just repeat the initial slash very quickly, which is a lot faster than committing to the combo. And you also don't have to deal with the final hit of that combo, which often sends enemies flying and gives them time to attack again. Melee combat also happens in third person, and the camera is a bit clunky. It just never feels perfect. It can feel good at certain times, but not great. And ranged is in a similar boat. It feels like any sort of sim when we shoot. The longer we stay still, the more accurate that will be. But it has the same problem as melee, just in reversed. Ranged doesn't feel very good at the beginning of the game, and by the end of the game, it feels great. This is a problem mostly because it doesn't bode well for the kind of experience that Bloodlines sells you on at the beginning of the game. And because the finale of the game requires so much combat from the player, you're sort of railroaded into being really good at one of these two, and hope that you're good enough at it to overcome the end of the game strength tests. The Blood Guardian is a fairly simple fight though, mostly just slashing or shooting until the thing is dead. Once it is, we can head back to Jeanette to ask her what the hell is going on, because there sure wasn't supposed to be a Blood Guardian here, whatever that is. But once we get back, Jeanette is gone and Therese is back, and we have bigger problems. Jeanette was just using us to get back at her sister because that gallery was actually Therese's, and she's pissed. Luckily, if you kept the memento from the Ocean House earlier, she won't be that mad at you. But of course, there's one more thing that we have to do in this never-ending goose chase that the Vormans have sent us on. She apparently threatened Jeanette recently in one of their fights, and Tung definitely won't come out of hiding if he thinks Therese is out for her own sister's blood. This also has to do with the fact that Jeanette is on good terms with Tung compared to her sister. We can head to Surfside Diner to meet her, but once we do, we're attacked by multiple thugs. This was a setup by Therese, and Jeanette calls us to tell us as much. We're quickly sent back to Asylum, though, when we hear Jeanette scream as Therese attacks her. Once we arrive, we get the big reveal that Jeanette and Therese are essentially the same person. They both represent different aspects of Therese's personality. This scene is perfectly done as Therese switches back and forth between her personalities, one side caked with smearing lipstick and the other clean and frazzled. The camera angle notes which character we're seeing here, which side, literally, of Therese we're dealing with.
You never gave me any credit for anything, Therese. I was the one calling the shots. Bertram was dancing on my leash. How does it feel to know that I beat you? Isn't it obvious? I'm about to rid the night of this deviant, backstabbing whore.
Therese is at a breaking point. She can't deal with Jeanette anymore, and the two have realized that one has to go. You can pick a side, either Jeanette's or Therese's, or you can convince them both to coexist, which is the option I went with. This is determined by your relationship with the women, though, and relies on the things you said to them earlier in the game. While this is sort of a wacky outcome and certainly catches you off guard if you don't know it's coming, there's a bit of a darker story here. Through the argument that the two are having, we can infer a few things. It seems like Therese was without Jeanette when she was a child, but she was assaulted by her father. Her father was eventually killed, and Jeanette claims that Therese did this. Eventually, Jeanette appeared out of Therese's need for an outlet, a way to let loose the shackles that life had put around her, to become the other extreme, to the opposite side of repressed and reserved. She reflects this need from Therese to express herself and is sort of essential to her personality. In the end, both sisters need each other. They both serve massive roles in the ruling of the Santa Monica territory, and ideally, you can get them to work together, just taking over their own respective areas of the city. It certainly isn't healthy, but what Malkavian is, hell, what Kindred is. With this, though, we can finally go back to Bertrand Tongue, who is hanging out in a massive hollow barrel past a gate nearby. Tongue is a Nosferatu, which explains the appearance and secrecy. Tongue will take us to our final main mission in Santa Monica, planting the astrolight in the warehouse that Mercurio and the Prince want us to blow up. Once again, this mission gives us the choice to either go in sneaky, creeping our way around some of the enemies and making our way into the main warehouse building, or to go in guns a-blazing, taking out all of the thugs we see in front of us. Either way we take, we eventually get to the main building and plant the astrolight. We then only have so much time to get out, a ticking clock at the top of the screen. But if you were seen at all during your intrusion through the warehouse, then as you leave, you are attacked by a Sabbat. I haven't talked about the Sabbat really quite yet, but they are essentially the opposite of the Camarilla. They do not believe in the rules and institutions or even the Masquerade. They generally kill without a moral code. Their ideology leads them to believe that they are above humans, that they are superior to them, and therefore do not value their lives. There's a bit more to them than that, but honestly, outside of the Tzimisce, the game really just paints them as a bit of a generic enemy faction, rather than really the degenerate and truly evil brutes that they can be in the TTRPG. But this Sabbat is pretty difficult to kill, and it's probably the most difficult fight thus far. We can either outrun this thing, which is a challenge in and of itself, or outright kill it. Either way, as we get to the edge of the warehouse and it explodes, a strange wolf appears, quickly transforming himself into a man named Beckett. Beckett is a strange character, rarely specifically aligning with any side in the game. He is a neutral presence. His main specialty, though, is that he is a vampire scholar. He's incredibly renowned and probably knows the most about vampire lore. He answers a few of our questions, mostly about thin bloods and the Sabbat, but he notes something more important here, that there is a thickness in the air tonight, that people in general feel like something big is coming.
Most of my contacts here report sensing something unusual in the night air, like a sense of dread or pressure. But I'm not a native to these parts, so I can't tell if it's irregular. And since you're still fresh, perhaps you're not attuned to it.
This has been echoed by a lot of the people that we've already met in the game. A growing sentiment in the city is that something is just off. Beckett then runs off into the night and we're sent back to Tung's hideout. This allows us to head downtown and finally meet with the prince, but that begins the whole next section of the game, so we should probably talk about all of the side quests and optional activities you can get up to in Santa Monica before we leave it. Technically, the first side quest that we get is called the Regent's Riddle, and involves a strange invitation that we find on our desk when we arrive in Santa Monica. But the location of this riddle is in downtown, so we'll talk about that later. The pain of being Mercurio takes place when Mercurio, with his horrific wounds in the face of the chemists that attacked him, needs some morphine to deal with the pain. We can infiltrate the nearby medical clinic to try and find this. There are a ton of ways that we can go about this task, but we need to sneak through the place, taking vents and ducts, hacking computers to get emails and passwords, turning off cameras and unlocking medical cabinets to eventually get to the morphine. While in the Santa Monica clinic, we can find a girl who seems to be dying of some sort of pain. At this point, we have the choice to create our own ghoul by giving her our blood. If we do this, then she will become enraptured with the main character. We'll meet her later in downtown and she will become our personal ghoul, living in our apartment there, giving us money and even kidnapping a person for us to feed on, even if we don't want him there. There are 2 quests we can gain down at the beach. We haven't talked about it yet, but all of the vampires down here are Thin Bloods. Thin Bloods are a relatively new development in vampire society. Basically, when they are embraced, they show no or little signs of the clan that they were embraced by. For example, a person could be embraced by a Tremere, and then they would gain the Tremere disciplines and assumingly affinity for blood magic. But if someone is embraced by a Tremere and does not gain these disciplines and little physical and mental faculty upgrades, then they are considered a Thin Blood. Thin Bloods are generally looked down upon in kindred society, mostly because they are considered a herald of the end times. There is a prophecy or rumor in this world that says the end of the kindred world will come when the antediluvians wake up after slumbering for hundreds of years, and they will come to wreak havoc on the modern vampire world. They will destroy every younger vampire, take their power, and end the world effectively. This is called Gehenna, and is what many attribute the thickness in the air to, the coming end times. One of the signs of Gehenna is supposed to be the regular appearance of Thin Bloods. Essentially, vampires have lasted too long, and their clan abilities are starting to dissipate the further down in generation they get. No one really knows if this is true, but regardless, Thin Bloods are heavily discriminated against because of it. Some people believe that they should be entirely wiped out, and others just consider them a nuisance. Either way, they are cast out by both mortal and kindred societies. One of the Thin Bloods on the beach is looking for a way to reverse the embrace, wanting to go back to his normal life. We can sell him some snake oil by telling him that if he takes out the head vampire, all other vampires will revert back to being a human. Giving him a wooden stake from under the pier and selling it to him, we can tell him who the head vampire is, and picking the President of the United States is easily the funniest option because he just immediately runs off into the darkness. You can also sell him some blood packs and a bubblegum wrapper if you're particularly strapped for cash. The other Thin Blood down here is E, a bit more concerned with his state in the world. He's upset at the prejudice that he's been thrust into, and hopes that he can find the person that turned him, his sire. He was embraced after meeting a girl recently, and we can go look for her around town. We can investigate the diner where we find some of her belongings, and track her back to a bail bonds business. There, we can get information on a car she was associated with. We can eventually find her journal in this car to learn that she was embraced by a German man named Rolf Totten. She was a Thin Blood as well and was afraid to feed because she didn't want to kill anyone. We can find her in the medical clinic. There's a man down here named Vandal Cleaver who is selling blood bags to vampires. We can actually buy some from him, but we can also access this secret room where Lily is being kept and drained of her blood. We can let her out, but because she's so hungry, she enters a frenzied state. The beast fully takes over, and she accidentally kills one of the workers here. If you play your cards right, you can send her back to E down on the beach, and when we return, the couple are planning to leave the city. This whole quest, once again, does a really good job at slowly introducing us to the world of VTM. Thin Bloods are a curiosity that the player has from the beginning of the game, and the motivation for the player is to learn more about this subject. Because the concept is tied in with larger things that we also want to know about, like the end of the world, the player naturally wants to complete side quests like this. Bloodlines handles these concepts so masterfully because it doesn't shove the world in the player's face. You can run through the game and not learn about concepts like Thin Bloods. You can complete Bloodlines incredibly ignorant of some of the deeper complexities of its world, and that's fine. But take the time to carve out some of the optional tasks, and you'll not just be rewarded with experience and money, but a more clear world, information that makes you and your character better able to operate in this kindred landscape. Completing Thinned Blood naturally starts another quest, replanting a lily. Because Vandal Cleaver no longer has someone to harvest for blood, we can find a replacement for him at Asylum by convincing a woman to head to the blood bank, where Cleaver will keep her locked away, just like Lily was. But doing this actually causes us to lose some humanity, getting closer to the beast with every action. The Haunted Hunter quest sees us looking for an Asian vampire, quote-unquote, in the area. Once we find them, it turns out to be a member of the Kwai Jin, a group that we'll get more into later in the game. We can take a couple quests from the bail bondsman named Arthur in town. He's incredibly talkative and just won't shut up. Arthur's bounty hunter has recently gone missing, so we need to go find him. We can head to his apartment, which is across the hall from Mercurio's. It looks like he was looking into someone called McGee, and we can track his last known whereabouts to the Devil's Brand tattoo parlor. Heading there, though, we find the place empty, with only a ringing phone. A man is calling about securing a model for his prosthetics company. He runs Gimbel's Prosthetics, and we can agree to be his replacement model. Heading there, though, we quickly find out the man is running a torture house. Strange images cover his walls, blood coats the floors, and we eventually find Carson the bounty hunter being kept in the basement. The man he was looking for has already been fully amputated, just turned into a chunk of torso at this point. Gimbel then attacks us, and we can easily kill him because he's just a human. Carson decides to give up the bounty hunting life, and we can start the next quest by agreeing to do some off-the-books work for Arthur. He wants us to check on a man named Mike Durbin in town, who we quickly find out has fled the area and headed downtown. We can check in on him once we get to Hollywood, but we'll revisit this quest in a later section. We can eventually head back to the medical clinic to complete a request from the prince. Apparently someone has found some werewolf blood, and it's been transported to the clinic for testing. To keep the masquerade intact, we need to sneak inside and secure it before the mortals figure out what's going on. Like I said before, all of these quests are just packed in tight. Santa Monica, and the same can be said for downtown and Hollywood, just feels so full. It feels like every corner you turn, every corner of a building is hiding some interaction, some sort of a quest, knowledge, and rewards. The mystery, the illusion is still there at this point. We are a fledgling vampire trying to find our way in this city. We're either solving these problems because we're looking for a way out, more money and more information, or we're just as clueless as the Thin Bloods, and we're trying to help out whoever we can, clutching onto this last morsel of humanity that seems so near, because our embrace only happened so recently. Will we be able to hold on to that humanity, or will it crumble just as quickly as the rest? The answer to that question lies downtown. When our character arrives downtown, they are immediately attacked by some nameless Sabbat. They seek to get back at him for blowing up the Sabbat warehouse. Strangely, one of the Sabbat, before he's about to tear into Jacob, turns to the camera and straight up breaks the fourth wall.
Boys, I think we could all use a little entertainment. Those of you sitting in the first few rows will get wet.
I found this moment so odd because it doesn't really happen any other time throughout the game. There are a few little dialogue options here and there that might hint to the fact that this is a video game, but this is the only time someone looks straight at the camera and talks to the audience. Regardless, before they can do anything, Nines Rodriguez shows up to save us. Only armed with a pistol, he manages to scare off the Sabbat. One of them tries to attack Nines after feigning a retreat and is quickly killed. Nines is a leader of the Anarch movement and doesn't say much to us here though, mainly telling our character to head to the last round bar because we haven't heard the official story just yet. Before we do that though, we need to head over to meet the prince. As we enter the Venture Tower, we're greeted with a familiar face, Officer Chunk. The game seems to want your character to be annoyed with Officer Chunk. When you talk to him, you can either be sort of polite or you can just be straight up fed up with listening to him. But honestly, I kind of liked Officer Chunk. He's not a great guy, definitely a bit of a creep. I believe that he spies on people's apartments in this building or something, but I think he's mostly just lusting over food. He's just a weird little freak, and I kind of wished I could be nice to him. Arriving upstairs, we can finally meet the prince again, LaCroix. LaCroix is always flanked by his sheriff. A sheriff is a position that most princes have in Vampire the Masquerade, someone kept there to protect them and essentially be their enforcer. The sheriff is a mysterious figure though, and the only thing we really saw from him so far was the outburst of power he exhibited earlier in the game. LaCroix applauds us on our job destroying the warehouse, and he asks us if anyone got in our way. Of course, Mercurio kind of failed by getting beat up, and Jeanette and Therese definitely got in our way, but they weren't exactly bad people, so we don't have to tell him about them. This decision will affect things in our relationship with these characters later in the game. LaCroix is a venturer though, through and through. He's all business, all politics, and he plans to use us to do some of his bidding around the area. We don't really have a choice because he basically gave us mercy at the beginning of the game. He is the reason we're still alive at this point. He tells us about a ship that was found out at sea called the Elizabeth Dane. It was without crew, and there seems to be a mystery surrounding the ship. We can actually hear about this on the news earlier in the game. The police are currently investigating the ship, but the reason that everyone's eyes are on the vessel is because it was carrying the Onkaran sarcophagus. No one truly knows what is inside this relic, but it's considered to be ancient, and LaCroix wants to know more about it, since it's in his city. LaCroix believes that the sarcophagus may be connected to the rumblings about something unusual happening in the city as of late. We are to inspect the sarcophagus for strange activity, find out what the police have found, and take the cargo manifest from the ship. We're supposed to do all of this without being seen, ensuring that none of the officers on board know we were there. LaCroix tells us to go see Nines Rodriguez to essentially humor him and his rhetoric. We'll soon learn why LaCroix isn't a big fan of Nines, and vice versa. So we can head over to the last round, a small bar tucked into the back corner of the downtown area. This is where we meet the Anarchs, and where the clear lines start to be drawn in the conflict that LA is currently embroiled in. Namely, we're finally introduced to the Anarch movement. The Anarchs are essentially an answer to the Camarilla and the established hierarchy. They seek to say that there isn't as much of a need for rules as the Camarilla say, that the rules they enforce and establish, essentially, no feeding in front of other people and no killing each other, is already common knowledge. It doesn't need to be enforced by threat of death, and they don't need people to say what they can and can't do. The other problem, as they see it, is that the Camarilla considers everyone a part of the Camarilla, whether they agreed to be in it or not. So their laws and rules are applicable to all, not just the people that have decided to be in their coalition. This is at least what some of them represent and espouse, namely Damsel, the first woman we meet downstairs. And a lot of these Anarchs, well, let's just say they aren't too happy that we're working with the prince.
Oh, you want to know what my problem is? All right, I'll tell you what my problem is. You ready? You are my goddamn problem. Anyone who would lay it down for some cape in an ivory tower deserves what they get.
Skelter, though, who is upstairs with a few others, is a bit more philosophical about the Kindred's right to freedom. The fact that all Kindred are carrying a curse from Cain means that they are essentially obligated to not be locked down by more rules and regulations. Paying for freedom by accepting a curse is payment enough, and the Kindred have a right to that freedom.
See, we weren't meant to live like that. man, I followed someone else's rules for 3 years in Vietnam. But it wasn't until after the embrace that I understood real oppression.
We can talk to Nines as well, the supposed leader of the Anarchs, though they maintain it isn't really like that. He's not a leader like a prince is a leader. He doesn't give orders or tell them what to do. And of course, Nines is concerned with the fact that the people running the Camarilla are the ones with the most power, the most influence, the most safety. This is obviously a clear allegory to the real human world as well. Money and power all rests at the top, while the people at the bottom suffer. The ones at the top make all of the decisions, so why would they ever change anything? Nines makes this parallel as well. He suffered through the Depression as a human, and he saw this inequality rack the world. To add to all of this, LA was an anarch-free state until recently. This meant that there was no Camarilla representative ruling there. LaCroix's presence here is relatively new. His parting words then advise us to ditch LaCroix once we've finished our business with him.
LA's the school of hard knocks, so keep your friends close and your enemies in a barbecue pit. Once you square things with LaCroix, don't give that son of a bitch the time of night. I got my eye on you, kid.
The last important person we can speak to here is Smiling Jack, our old friend from the tutorial. When we asked Jack about his opinions on things during that section, he made it pretty clear that he wanted us to make our own decisions, to not influence us too much. But now we can see how he really feels. While Jack is aligned with the Anarchs, he's also quite a free spirit. His opinions are very simple, but straightforward, common sense, essentially. The last round is a strange sort of shift for Bloodlines. This is why I have so much respect for this game, and specifically the Santa Monica area of the game. Bloodlines throws you into its world, a true fledgling in every sense of the word. You are forced to make your own way, solve your own problems, maybe pick up a few opinions and pieces of knowledge along the way, but only once that is done are you actually introduced to the parties at play. The Anarchs and the Camarilla are a mystery for the first few hours. The last round gives us a widened world, a slew of new information and perspectives. It is a threshold that allows us to fully cross over into this world, to embrace it and be embraced by it. And once that threshold is crossed, there's no going back. All of this information will inform decisions that we make later. But those decisions will be informed by the information that we learn now and the small responses and decisions that we make now. After we talk to the Anarchs, we can finally head to the Elizabeth Dane. We can either straight up sneak in or convince the police officer to help us infiltrate the place. If we persuade him, he'll distract another officer up ahead, making it a bit easier to get inside. Once we do, we can look at the sarcophagus on video feeds and look at the flight manifest. When we head back to LaCroix, we arrive just as he is stopping his meeting with the Primogens of the city. The Primogens are essentially elder representatives of their respective clans. One of these we'll meet later, but for now, we can report back to LaCroix. We tell him that the sarcophagus was already opened when we got there and give him the manifest. LaCroix already has another task for us, though. One of the Primogen, Alistair Grout, the Malkavian Primogen, isn't responding. And this is important because the Primogen are on edge. The Sabbat presence is making them worried and they want something done about it. We need to head for Grout's estate, which we can take a taxi to. On the way in, we see Nines Rodriguez leaving the place. Once inside, we're tasked with infiltrating this absolute mansion where there are strange experiments attacking us as soon as we enter. Throughout the facility, we can listen to Grout's tapes and recordings, witnessing his descent even further into madness, as much as a Malkavian really can. Ironically, Grout operated an insane asylum, and one of his patients was a Malkavian. He was embraced by the Malkavian and eventually started to research his own kind. He started to hear voices, as a Malkavian is wont to do. He became paranoid after hearing the voices tell him of a powerful and evil vampire named LaCroix. At some point, he receded back into his home, building a mansion full of traps and puzzles, isolating himself from the rest of the world. He loved his wife greatly and was seeking some sort of cure for their illness, but eventually made a Faustian bargain that led him to where we are now. The house itself is full of traps and puzzles, mostly pulling on a variety of light fixtures to reveal hidden passageways. Nothing too crazy, but I did like the general layout and design of this place. The checkerboard pattern on the floors makes the building feel sanitized. The lack of decoration on the walls makes it feel like a facility rather than a home. I should note that during this footage and some later footage, I was experiencing an issue, which I later fixed, that would cause the blood textures to appear as big red blocks on the walls and floor. I believe this has to do with overlaying textures because it would have an effect on the graffiti around the downtown area as well. I would eventually get the game to work properly by running it in compatibility mode, just in case you're watching this video and facing the same thing. We eventually make our way into the inner sanctum, cutting down hordes of the insane vampires inside. But when we reach Grout's quarters, we find only his skeleton remaining, a stake shoved through his heart, and his hands and feet are bound to the bed. Outside, we're introduced to Grunfeld Bach, a vampire hunter who has come for Grout, not realizing he's already dead. He plans to burn the building to the ground. It doesn't seem like Bach was the one that killed Grout, but he came here for that reason and means to attack LaCroix next. We have to then escape the burning building, and fire does far more damage to us than regular attacks or traps. We do eventually get back to LaCroix and report the bad news, which he is not happy about. Now we can either tell LaCroix that we saw Nines leaving the mansion, or keep quiet about it. I accidentally told him about Nines, though I definitely didn't want to, but Nines was acting odd, and speaking to him previously, it doesn't seem like the type of thing that he would just up and do. Also, there's sort of an obligation that we have to both sides of the issue in Bloodlines. Both the Camarilla and the Anarchs sort of saved our life. If it weren't for Nines speaking up in that meeting, we would be dead. But also, LaCroix lays claim to the fact that he was the one that literally spared our life. So in this way, we're sort of indebted to both of them, and they kind of make this clear to us as well. But at least with the Anarchs, we have a choice. We don't have to do their quests. They are optional. But with LaCroix, we are forced to. Some might point this out as a negative of the system, that you don't have two paths that you can choose essentially for the main quest. But that really speaks to the politics and the control of the Camarilla, that you are forced to work for LaCroix because he has something over you. Power. Regardless, telling LaCroix about Nine's presence at the mansion really pisses him off. He wants to call a blood hunt right away, but he knows that this would be a declaration of war. He decides to confer with the city's primogen on this matter. For now, we are tasked with retrieving the sarcophagus from the Natural History Museum where it's been transferred to. He also notes that the manifest included a small box that they haven't been able to locate, so we need to keep an eye out for that as well. If we head back to the last round, they are very upset that we told LaCroix about Nines.
You measly fuck, you got a lot of nerve showing up here, Lick.
Nines has gone into hiding now as well because there is a target on his back. Regardless, we have to head to the museum now as a part of the next main quest. This involves a pretty intense sneaking mission where we have to weave our way through the facility and eventually reach a room to find the sarcophagus box destroyed and the relic missing. Beckett is already here. He has become interested in the item, seeing as he is a scholar and has heard a lot about it lately, but he was late as well. He believes that it might just be a mummified Mesopotamian king. Beckett himself wants to debunk a lot of the ludicrous conspiracy theories that have been purported as of late. Personally, he doesn't believe in Gehenna, no antediluvians waiting in the wings as far as he sees, but part of that disbelief is trying to prove these claims wrong, and he thinks there is a simpler explanation. Beckett here will also answer some of our questions, giving us his perspective on Gehenna, the antediluvians, and the history of vampires, mainly Cain, which he believes is a myth. Since the sarcophagus has been stolen, we need to once again report back to LaCroix. He says that he's already met with the primogen and they've determined that there will be a blood hunt called on Nines. Once we tell him that the sarcophagus was stolen, he immediately knows who it is, Gary, the primogen of the Nosferatu. Apparently, they were the ones tasked with finding the artifact in the first place and getting the keys to the museum, so he must have stolen it. Gary and his kindred live beneath the streets of Hollywood, so we are tasked with, once again, heading to a new district and meeting the Baron there to see if he knows how we can get in contact with Gary. But before we head to Hollywood, let's talk about all the side quests you can take on in downtown. We can take on a few quests from the Anarchs, probably the first quests that we can actually get in this area. Damsel sends us on a mission to seek out some plague bearers in the area. Apparently, when a kindred feeds on someone who is sick, they can spread this sickness to anyone else they feed on. Someone in the area is doing this and we have to seek them out. It's also a pretty big problem because the CDC has arrived in town to investigate things, and more eyes on vampires is always a bad thing. There's 2 quests associated with this, one where we talk to some homeless people in the area who direct us to the sewers, where we meet Brother Canker. He is a plagued member of some strange vampire cult that is trying to spread their plague to the world. They're called the Brotherhood of the Ninth Circle. We can defeat him in a pretty simple hand-to-hand fight. We can also take out Jezebel Locke, another plague bearer and member of the cult in that area. Chasing down this thread further, we can find cult flyers being handed out and track down their symbol to a building in the area. This results in us basically slaughtering tons of lumbering and hostile sick people in this building. We eventually confront Bishop Vic, the leader of this strange faction. Taking him out hopefully ends this whole issue, for now. Skelter, another member of the Anarchs, will give us a simple quest to get rid of a ghoul named Patty. She has been bugging some vampires, taking their blood has made her obsessed, and we can either persuade her to leave, kill her, or lead her back to be killed by another vampire in the city.
I knew you'd talk to me. I swear you were all like totally drawn to me. I'm surprised I don't know you. I usually meet all the LA vampires out on the scene. Not a lot of you out tonight, which is weird because I don't know of any parties going on.
These last examples will lose us humanity, but all will give us a masquerade redemption. Heading towards the abandoned hospital in the area, we'll see us stumbling across a TV crew who is filming a ghost show in the city. One of the members of the crew is alive, but the rest have been drugged downstairs by some monster. We can head through this hospital and find the monster, a very old vampire named Pisha. She eventually tasks us with sending the producer of the show back down so that she can eat him. She actually consumes humans whole and is in the city because she is collecting artifacts of power. We can retrieve 2 for her, but we only come across them during later missions, so we'll come back to those in a bit. We can also do a couple of quests for the bartender of the local club, Confession, where we can also dance our hearts away once again.
Tragedy.
Venus wants us to deal with a money problem she has with some Russians. Once we take care of this, though, she wants us to take out Boris, her business partner who basically wants too much control of her bar, and Venus herself. We can end this quest in one of 2 ways, by killing Boris for Venus, or by killing Venus for Boris. Downtown also has some other interesting things outside of side quests, though. We can get a new haven here, a pretty nice apartment from LaCroix when we arrive. If we choose to make the girl in the medical clinic earlier our ghoul, she will appear to us when we arrive in this part of the city. She will be available for us to draw blood from, essentially creating a good resource for blood points in the game. She also, if we appear to her at a specific time in the game, will give us literally the best body armor that you can get in Bloodlines. We can also buy weapons from Fat Larry, who is by far the best character in the entire game.
I am the proprietor and salesman of the month several years in a row. The ladies call me, oh God, but you can call me Fat Larry with a F-A-T, cause I know I got a weight problem, I just don't give a fuck.
He has a quest for us as well called Traffic that sees us retrieving a briefcase from the Tong, a local gang that we won't really meet until we head to Chinatown. This does further the concept, though, that Bloodlines tries to manage constantly, introducing concepts early in the game that we'll get to later. Whether these are larger concepts like Thin Bloods or more specific factions like the Tong or the Kwai Jin, it all makes the world of Bloodlines feel more realistic, like an interconnected web of groups and characters. We can also continue the riddle quest from before, tracking down the message to a Tremere Chantry in the city. We meet Maximilian Strauss here, the Tremere Primogen who sent us the invite. He will basically give us some information on people in the city, and since the Primogen are well informed, older, and knowledgeable, he actually has some decent info. But Maximilian will be more important towards the end of the game, so we'll talk about him in a bit. But with downtown mostly completed, we can finally head to the next area of the game, Hollywood. Arriving in Hollywood, we need to go speak to Isaac Abrams, the Baron of the area. This is once again putting the traditions into action. We need to show ourselves to the Baron of that area before we're allowed to operate there. Abrams is a member of the Anarchs. Though he dresses and appears to be a member of the Camarilla, he has nothing really nice to say about them and the prince.
If I may give you one final word of warning, do not trust LaCroix. Do not play the damned politics of the Camarilla. This city hasn't needed them in a long time, and won't ever.
Before we can get any information on Gary, and in turn try to find the sarcophagus, we need to do something for Abrams. This is an extension of his tradition of the barony role, but also an extension of the theme of political favor in the world of Vampire the Masquerade. This favor involves finding a movie that Abrams purchased and was supposed to receive, but he hasn't heard anything from the seller. We have to get to the seller's location from a local internet cafe. We can meet him behind the Fast Cash building where he gives us the real location of the movie, but is clearly terrified of what he saw on the tape. He thinks he's being followed and eventually runs off before being ripped into a manhole. His location is just a hint to a former movie star, who we can find out is now deceased from a movie star database in the cafe. We can grab the tape from the nearby mausoleum. Bringing this tape back to Abrams, we realize that he wasn't seeking this movie for his personal use, he was looking for it because he was concerned. The tape itself is a snuff film produced by Death Mask Productions. It shows a woman being killed by some strange creatures, but the tape isn't complete. It's also no coincidence that the Nosferatu all went into hiding right when this tape started circulating around the city. We need to find a complete copy to actually be able to figure out how this connects to the Nosferatu and Gary.
Behind the spit-shine gloss of the Hollywood Dream Factory, there's another city churning out a vile byproduct for the furtive consumption of a debauched audience.
We can head to a local store where the owner gives us a secret message for an anonymous payphone caller. This leads us to a Lucky Star motel room, where we find tons of blood and gore all over the walls, along with an internet cafe key. The production stage for Death Mask Productions actually lies behind a door in the internet cafe. This is where these snuff films are shot, but clearly not the one that we found. We do find some of those strange creatures here though, and are forced to kill a ton of them. We can eventually find one of the guys that worked at the studio. He's terrified out of his mind because of the creatures attacking him. He tells us that his studio didn't actually make the tape, they just found it in a house in the hills. We can then let him be murdered by the creatures because he's an actual piece of garbage. The rest of the tape reveals where the house is. Abrams believes that whatever made the creatures that have been appearing is using them to bother or threaten the Nosferatu, which is why they've went into hiding. Arriving at the house from the tape, we can slash our way through the creatures and eventually find the kindred behind this in the basement. He is a Tzimisce, one of the Sabbat clans that specialize in strange blood experiments. He's been using people's bodies as a canvas, creating these grotesque creatures from real human forms. This whole thing was meant as an attack on the Camarilla. He planned to take out the Nosferatu so that they didn't have their eyes and ears, so that he could continue to attack the Camarilla without their pushback. One of the best written lines in the entire game comes from this character, though.
Blessed creatures, I have broken through their mortal crust and drawn from them their greatest strength, mutability. I coax bone, weave flesh, and lay sinew tight until it strains to lash out.
The Tzimisce is just our way in at this point though, so of course we have to fight him. He will summon creatures and teleport around the room. We have to be quick to be able to get damage off on him, all while destroying the creatures that he summons as well. Defeating him, we can head into the sewers. Remember when I said that the haunted house mission was probably the most talked about and loved part of this game? Well, the sewers is easily the most hated part of the game, and kind of for good reason. We essentially move through this place, killing a ton of enemies, mostly the small creatures that serve no challenge at this point in the game, but also new, larger creatures that can present a bit of a roadblock for us. None of it's really much of a challenge, though. There are scant puzzles throughout the long journey, but nothing really interesting or noteworthy. And on top of that, the whole section is just far too long. If you don't know what you're doing, this section is easily an hour long, if not more. An hour of just the same tunnels, the same general level design, and countless battles with the same enemies. It's not great. After wading through the sewers, we will finally reach the Nosferatu hideout underneath the sewers. Small and cramped tunnels weave through the rock, littered with trash and disposed signs from the surface above. The Nosferatu are existing in their own little paradise, a recreation of the surface world, a sort of shadow that lies just beneath it. Not quite the same, but maybe good enough for them. We can talk to a few of the members of the mysterious clan down here, but our main target is Gary, who we can find in a back room with skeletons laid out at a table. He doesn't show himself right away. Like I said before, when describing the clan, the Nosferatu sort of enjoy the idea that they are disfigured. Well, they don't enjoy it, but they enjoy using it against people, scaring individuals, not expecting their horrific visage. They oftentimes play into this idea that they are a freakish ghoul, malformed through the curse of the kindred. Gary exemplifies this, appearing as a disembodied voice, and only when the time is right, appearing before our eyes. Gary is actually Gary Golden, a former actor and star in the Hollywood scene. I actually noticed this name earlier in the celebrity database at the Internet Cafe in Hollywood, but didn't make the connection until arriving at his lair. In my opinion, these small details are what make the game truly special. Once we get to the end of the game, we can talk about the network of interweaving fates, alliances, and connections, but really, just the little details make Bloodlines feel like a truly inspired world, like a place with people that know each other, not this disconnected scene of NPCs that might make reference to the one standing 2 feet away, but that you know have never really actually met. It's a feature that many RPGs over the years have tried and failed to create, but Bloodlines does it near perfectly. With Gary in front of us, though, we can finally ask him about the sarcophagus. He does know where it is. He sent an agent named Barabbas after it, but he's gone missing. We need to go find him in Chinatown, and if we do, he'll tell us about the location of the artifact. This, of course, takes us to the final and weakest district of the game, but before we head there, let's talk about all of the side activities that we can complete in Hollywood. We can finish a quest from earlier in the game called Mud Hunt. Finding the man that Arthur Kilpatrick was looking for earlier in the Skyline Apartments will actually quickly see him murdered. His killer is the same person that's been causing the Carnival of Death down at the pier. Finding him, we realize what we knew all along, that he's a vampire. He's been seeking justice for his family who was killed during a carjacking. He wants to bring criminals and thugs to heel. We can, of course, just kill him if we want to restore the Masquerade, or let him go and convince him to not kill anymore. We can take 2 quests from a dancer in the city named Velvet Velour, or VV. She is worried about vampire hunters in the area staking them out. We can take 1 out at a local peep show. Her second quest sees us tracking down a guy who is writing a screenplay about vampires that seem eerily similar to the real world. He's actually working with a kindred, but we have to find out who. The one he's working with is actually Julius, one of the Thin Bloods on the beach in Santa Monica, and we can either tell him to leave or kill him. Similarly, we can also help a previous celebrity kindred named Ash Rivers, who is also being tracked by vampire hunters. We can find a man that watches over the cemetery, ensuring that he takes care of the zombies there every night. His name is Romero, but since he can't leave the place, he wants to head out and find a Lady of the Night. We can either bring one to him or protect the place while he's gone. He'll also increase our firearms skill by teaching us how weapons work. LaCroix gives us a task to give a local cafe a bad review because the prince has an interest in the local realty scene. Isaac Abrams wants a gargoyle removed from the local theater. We can either take him down, a formidable foe, or we can just convince him to guard the city with Abrams. Mitnick, one of the Nosferatu in the underground lair, is trying to upgrade their internet infrastructure. We can help him secretly install receivers around the city. I haven't really talked about this yet, but the Nosferatu are the most technologically savvy out of all the vampires. It kind of fits because they're all sort of forced to stay underground, so they just naturally become hackers. Amalia, another Nosferatu, wants us to find a copy of Guy magazine. Amalia used to be a model and is very jealous of the woman that sort of took her spot after she became a kindred and went underground. There's a very weird quest that is more of an Easter egg called Poster Session that we get from Gary through an email. He wants us to collect different tapes for him, and in exchange we receive posters of the different ladies in the game for our apartment. It's very sort of Coomer, but honestly I do like the idea that you can do extra stuff to change your personal space. It's something I wish games would do more of, but maybe with like artifacts from missions rather than like revealing posters of the female characters in the game. One of my favorite quests in the game starts when a woman you knew from your human life approaches you on the street. She's worried about you, and apparently all of your friends and family have been trying to get in contact with you. You can try to talk her down and convince her that you're someone else, but she eventually might head off to make a call, thinking that you just need help and you're too afraid to ask. Of course, this sort of forces us to ensure the masquerade is maintained by feeding on her. It's a very small, short experience, but is really a personal exchange. It makes you really understand how much changes when you become a kindred. This is something I've wanted to talk about for a bit, but Bloodlines and the TTRPG it's based on both go really far to push this idea that being a vampire is really not a great or glamorous thing. It's certainly not like classic vampire myths where you just have to avoid garlic, steaks, and fire, and everything's all good. You can party in nightclubs and drink as much blood as you want as long as Blade isn't around. In the world of darkness, not only do you have to respect the masquerade, meaning that you certainly can't feed openly, you also have to ensure that you respect those above you, those in power. Don't step out of line or piss one off because they'll be looking for a reason to kill you. It's all about politics in this world as well. Some theorize that this goes back thousands of years, a strange concept called the jihad, with a Y, not an I, important distinction. It's the idea that the antediluvians, from their slumber, are influencing the politics and machinations of the different houses, that they are puppeting things behind the scenes, starting wars, influencing their clans and world events as a way to gain more of a foothold in society. So the Camarilla controls what you can do in the world, but also the Elders possibly control every move you make and the world that you live in. Down to a more practical level, as a fledgling, you're sort of at the behest of those above you. Even the prince is manipulating us for his own gain. He claims it's for the good of the city, but that's yet to be seen. On top of that, you have to deal with the roll of the dice that is your clan. Did you get an unlucky draw as a Nosferatu and are forced to live underground, stalking in the shadows, unable to be seen by mortal eyes? Or did you get something a bit more human, like a Ventru or a Toreador? Either way, you can't see your family or friends again, which is exactly what this short quest illustrates. You're no longer allowed contact with anyone you loved or cared for, ostracized into a new society. Comply with its ways, or you'll be swiftly removed. Didn't ask to be a vampire? Who cares? It's a cruel life from a societal perspective, but you're also constantly dealing with the beast. Every step you take, every action brings you further or closer to the beast. You can't rest, you can't stop, you can't kick back or take a break, because the beast is always waiting to claw its way out. With the politics and society bearing down on you, the Sabbat and hunters out for your throat, even your own mind trying to take over. What kind of eternity is that? It certainly doesn't sound appealing, and generally, when I see vampire media, I'm never really convinced that I wouldn't like to join that party. Film and literature always try to make it seem unappealing by bringing up the fact that you, outlive everyone you know, but Bloodlines truly makes it seem like a hell that I would rather say no to. Unfortunately, our character didn't have a choice. One complaint that I do have for Hollywood, since we're about to leave the area, is just that the Nosferatu hideout is so far away from the city itself. There are a few quests that require us to return back to the place, and it's just such a massive trek through the streets, into the cemetery, down into the mausoleum. I kind of wish that we could turn in all quests or conversate with the Nosferatu through email after we visit the place. Just a thought, but it would remove a lot of the walking that we'd have to do, especially when we're nearing the end of the game. With Hollywood in the rear view, though, it's time to head to the final district of the game, Chinatown.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Entering Chinatown, we have to first introduce ourselves to the leader of this place, Ming Zhao. Ming Zhao is not a traditional kindred, but a member of the Kuai Jin. The Kuai Jin are an odd group because they aren't really vampires, at least not traditionally. When comparing them to the kindred, they don't really work the same at all. The Kuai Jin don't have disciplines, they don't really use blood for their abilities, but instead channel their chi. And most of them don't really feed on the blood of mortals, only the younger ones. They also don't embrace each other to become their kind. Because of these differences, Camarilla vampires certainly do not consider them kin, and they are generally not very kind or trusting of them. But we need the Kuai Jin's help because they may know where Barabbas is, and even where the sarcophagus is resting. So we can talk to Ming Zhao, who directs us to Wang Ho, a prominent businessman in the area. He is generally connected and might know where the Nosferatu agent is. He will help us, but of course his daughter has been kidnapped by a local gang called the Tong, so we need to get her back first. We can infiltrate a local business called the Lotus Blossom, a massage parlor in town. Here we cut down tons of the Tong and eventually get Kiki back for him. After we do this, Wang Ho will direct us towards Zhao, a friend of his and contact in town. He is immediately attacked by the Tong when we get there, and we have to briefly protect him, but he gives us the information that the Tong are in a nearby nightclub called Glaze. We can infiltrate the place, but once we confront the leader, we realize someone more powerful and influential is behind him. A person who calls himself the Mandarin directs us to his facility. Here, he carries out a few tests on us. It seems that he has figured out that vampires exist and is trying to find the boundaries of the creatures. He's of course testing out old myths and rumors like artificial UV rays, lightning, and flames. We can eventually break out of this place and make mincemeat of all the soldiers in the building. We find Barabbas being held downstairs and can free him. He helps us escape, and if you have high enough skills, on the way out, we can find that Ming Zhao was working with these people. Outside, we get a call from Gary, who gives us the information on the sarcophagus now that we've finally returned his agent to him. It's being held at a local Giovanni stronghold, and they happen to be having a meeting. The Giovanni are another of the Sabbat clans, at least during this period of VTM lore. At the party, we have to find a way in. We can persuade people to give us their invitations, we can sneak in the back, but once inside, we can talk to some of the members of the family, actually engaging in a side quest where we can give different members vying for political power information on their adversaries. The real goal here, though, is to get into the catacombs beneath the mansion. Journeying through the place, we eventually come across the Chang brothers, who are working for Ming Zhao. They have the sarcophagus behind them, but tell us to leave because we are violating an agreement between LaCroix and the Kuai Jin leader. This is big news, because if anyone else knew that LaCroix was dealing with the Kuai Jin, they would be very upset. Regardless, we take out the brothers and finally retrieve the sarcophagus. We can confront LaCroix about this when we get back to the tower, but he just says that the Kuai Jin are trying to turn us against him, to sow dissent within the ranks of the Camarilla. Regardless, Beckett is here to try and open the sarcophagus. No one can get it open at this time, though, because the lid just won't budge. The only person that might be able to tell us how to open it is the man that found the thing, a professor named Anders Johansson. Beckett believes that Johansson has been kidnapped by the hunters, so we need to infiltrate their stronghold and get him back, or at least find the information that he has. Both Beckett and LaCroix at this point seem hell-bent on opening the sarcophagus up. Beckett mainly wants an answer to whether an antediluvian is in there, but his motivation is pure curiosity. LaCroix, on the other hand, seems to want the assumed power that lies inside. One concept of vampire culture that we haven't talked about yet is a very taboo subject. When a vampire drains another vampire of all their blood, they gain all of their abilities and powers. Say, for example, an elder was attacked by a fledgling, and the fledgling drank all their blood. The fledgling would no longer be a weak newborn, but would have the powers, abilities, and strength of a 400-year-old kindred. This process is called diablerie and is very frowned upon. This is most of the reason that the antediluvians stay slumbering in a state called torpor, a sort of never-ending rest that vampires can take. They are hidden away to prevent power-hungry vampires from taking them over. But if LaCroix had an antediluvian right in front of him, with no one to stop him, he could just commit diablerie and skip hundreds of rungs on the ladder to the top. It's essentially a shortcut for him. But we're still in this whole thing, and regardless, someone is either going to have to open the thing or destroy it. But before we enter the finale of the game, let's briefly wrap up Chinatown before we bid adieu. Like I said before, I honestly think Chinatown is the weakest area in the game. It's just very rushed. Even the main quests that we already talked about are pretty weak. The side quests don't really fix that problem either. There's really only 5 in total, and none of them are super memorable. Also, most of the characters in this area are like very weird caricatures. There's a lot of that in the rest of the game too. Bloodlines definitely doesn't take itself too seriously or anything, but Chinatown just almost feels like it has barely any serious characters, and the whole thing just comes off as sort of goofy. Regardless, we can take on a quest to help out Yuki, a Japanese demon hunter that is in town trying to track down a Henge Yokai, a particularly powerful demon. We can help her out and set up a meeting with the demon and then ally with her to fight the demon head on, who is actually one of the stronger foes we face up to this point. We can take 2 strange quests for a man named Mr. Ox, who collects odd trinkets for his corner shop. One of them sees us retrieving the eyes of a dead man in town, and the other sees us planting a bad luck talisman in someone's locker. And we can try to side with or negotiate a dispute with 2 hitmen who want to kill each other. And with that, we can head out of Chinatown and make our way to the end of the game. Beginning the finale, we head to the Society of Leopold to take on the hunters directly. They have a very large compound and are particularly strong, but cutting through them and making our way into the tunnels surrounding the facility, we eventually come face to face with Grunfeld Bach once again. This is easily the weakest fight in the entire game, in my opinion. Maybe I just had a terrible build in the playthrough that I did record, but I just really did not like this fight. Bach basically blinds us and runs away when we get too close, and while we're far away from him, he fires shots at us from a rifle that do quite a bit of damage. So we have to sort of use the range for cover. I did think it was pretty interesting that Bach's shots could break and destroy nearly every part of the range, but we can really only get a few hits off on Bach before he runs away again. Once we defeat him, though, we can head upstairs and talk to Professor Johansson. He has been taken captive by the hunters, for his own safety, of course, and has no idea what's going on here. He will answer our questions, though, since he's thankful that we've killed his captors. His theory is that the sarcophagus belongs to a Mesopotamian king named Mesarok, and nothing more. But he's a silly human, how would he know? He even interprets the figures on the outside of the artifact drinking blood. This was often a symbol in ancient times of victory over an enemy, and some of the female figures could be representations of Lilith. Regardless, the whole thing needs to be opened with a key using a very specific mechanism. This must have been what was included in the shipping manifest, the box that was lost. As we leave the facility, Bach is still alive, and he uses his last breath to activate explosives set around the facility. We have a couple of minutes to get out before the place crumbles, and luckily we escape just in time to take a raft away from this place. Getting back, we find that the Venture Tower has been attacked. LaCroix is safe, but the Sabbat tried to raid the place and have his head. They are also looking for the sarcophagus, seeing it as a quick way for more power and strength in this cruel world. He wants us to head to the Hallowbrook Hotel, where the Sabbat have holed up, and take them out so that we can begin looking for the key. We can do this quickly, which essentially just results in another battle arena full of Sabbat. When we reach the end, though, our old Tzimisce friend is back. Before we kill him, he reveals that the Sabbat plan to destroy the sarcophagus. They believe it will bring about Gehenna, and actually aren't looking for more power or diablerie. That's just LaCroix. We kill him and leave the facility to find Ming Zhao waiting outside. She essentially sees that this situation is coming to a head and has decided to extend her hand in friendship, hopefully finding another ally before the end. She reveals that she's been used by LaCroix, just another pawn in his plans, and also shows us that she was the one that killed Grout. She had transformed herself to look like Nines that night, which is why he acted so odd when we saw him. We were meant to see him there because no one would believe that we would lie, being so new to the vampire thing and lacking the political acumen to concoct such a story. Before she leaves, she tells us that she has the key, and also warns us against siding with LaCroix because he will turn against us in the end. We can confront LaCroix with this information, but he only claims that he tricked Ming Zhao to eventually try and have the Kuai Jin rooted out for good. He wants to mobilize against them now, so he sends us over to the last round to propose an alliance with the Anarchs. And as insane as it sounds, it just might work, because like I said, the Kuai Jin hatred runs deep, Camarilla or not. On our way to the bar, Beckett stops us and tells us to not open the sarcophagus. He seems to have learned some new information, but does not elaborate much before leaving. We can tell the Anarchs about the proposed alliance, but we have to find Nines to really do anything about it. He's still hiding out, and Damsel gives us the location, Griffith Park. We can head over there, take the cab car up to the top of the mountain, and finally find Nines. He is a little hesitant about siding with LaCroix in this war, but considers fighting the Kuai Jin, until a fire erupts nearby. Nines decided to come out to the woods because it's werewolf country, and no one would look for him here. That fire was started deliberately, and was meant to attract the attention of these beasts. Werewolves are incredibly powerful in Vampire the Masquerade. They hate vampires, can't be reasoned with, and definitely can't be fought. Nines is attacked by one, sending him over the cliff, and we're forced to survive until the cab car arrives back on the mountain. We have 4 minutes to make it here, and the werewolf is incredibly dangerous. He can take half of our health in one swoop. We can solve this mission in one of two ways, either by killing the werewolf, which we can only do by luring it into the observatory doors and closing them on it, or by waiting the thing out. Either way, we can take the cab car back down after what is a pretty intense sequence. At the bottom of the mountain, Jack takes us back to the city, but to Santa Monica, to our old apartment. Apparently, LaCroix was playing us once again, because he called a blood hunt out on us while we were gone. He's told everyone, falsely of course, that we were allied with the Kuai Jin, covering for his own issues by telling everyone they were ours. He originally planned to kill us and Nines in Griffith Park with the werewolf attack, but since we survived, this is his plan B. Jack has a driver set up for us on the other side of Santa Monica, but we need to make it through the streets first with the blood hunt and all. Fighting vampires openly in the streets, we can eventually make it through and arrive at the taxi. Here, we're greeted with the same driver that we've used for the entire game, except up until now, this driver would really only ask us where we wanted to go. This figure is pretty strange, because he seems to know a lot. He asks us about our opinion on the various political situations around LA, and we're asked to give our side of the story. He's obviously a kindred, far more powerful and older than us. The game never explicitly says it, and from what I understand, this character was originally meant to be Kane himself, but it was left more intentionally vague because White Wolf was concerned that having Kane appear in the flesh would box them in narratively and answer a lot of questions that they didn't necessarily want answered at the time. But it's Kane. Come on, it's Kane. The conversation that we have here will determine what ending we get in the game and what path we're set down for the finale. So there are essentially 5 endings in the game, with slight variations on each one. All endings will require us to complete either one of 2 finale dungeons, or both, depending on the option that we choose. One of these finale dungeons takes place in Chinatown and sees us fighting the Kuai Jin and results in us having a boss fight with Ming Zhao herself, which is probably the hardest fight in the entire game. She's incredibly strong, and if you don't have a flamethrower here, then you're basically out of luck. She also generates small versions of her large Lovecraftian body, and those small versions, if they aren't destroyed, evolve into copies of her with slightly less health, but the same strength. The other finale dungeon takes place as we raid the Venture building, forcing us to kill... I don't want to say it. God, don't make me say it. Officer Chunk. And climb the building, taking out the sheriff in a final boss battle as he transforms into a large bat, and we have to catch him in between some spotlights. But essentially, there are 5 paths. If we side with Prince LaCroix, then we have to take out the Kuai Jin. If we side with the Anarchs, then we have to take out the Kuai Jin and the Prince. If we side with the Kuai Jin, then we have to take out the Prince. If we side with the Camarilla by joining forces with Maximilian Strauss, then we have to face both the Kwai-Jin and the Prince. And if we go our own way, you guessed it, we have to take out the Kwai-Jin and the Prince. Basically, though, unless we're siding with them, we're taking out the Kwai-Jin. Each of these paths results in a different ending, though. Siding with Prince LaCroix, we're named his new right-hand man, and the two open the sarcophagus only to reveal a large cache of C4, placed there by Smiling Jack himself. Venture Tower explodes, and we see Smiling Jack watching the explosion with the body of Messerak, the dead king that was inside of the sarcophagus, as Kane watches them just behind. Siding with the Anarchs, we're allowed to choose whether we want to open the sarcophagus or not. If we heed Beckett's warning, our character walks off into the sunset, and if not, then he dies in the blast. Siding with the Kwai-Jin, we are immediately betrayed by Zhao, tied to the sarcophagus and pushed into the bay. Siding with the Camarilla, the sarcophagus is placed inside of a warehouse, and LaCroix is given his final death for his crimes of forming an alliance with the Kwai-Jin. And if we side with no one, then we can head off into the sunset by ourselves, leaving the whole city in the rear view. So let's talk about the endings themselves and which one you should choose, or at least which makes sense. I want to preface this with the fact that I do like that there is a breadth of endings here. The Kwai-Jin and the Maximilian endings aren't really in the mix, though, because realistically, most people aren't going to pick those. Let's talk about the Prince, or the Camarilla, and the Anarchs, because this is sort of a microcosm of the entire political situation in the game. It also deals with the real genius of making a decision in this game. So let's first talk about the Anarchs and why you would or wouldn't make this decision. When I first started playing the game, I essentially viewed the Anarchs as the good guys, and I do think they are at the end of the day. They are essentially in favor of a revolution against the Camarilla. That's the ultimate goal, a new world where you don't have to fear breaking a rule and death around every corner. Not only that, but if the Camarilla was really abolished, you wouldn't have to worry about a league of elders ordering around the fledglings and neonates at the bottom, hiding out in their corners, fearful of the diablerie that may await. They are essentially the downtrodden, the people at the bottom that want a chance to survive. One of the most interesting things about the Anarchs as well is the Plague Bearer quest. They give you this quest because their community needs help. On top of that, they're trying to maintain the Masquerade by getting the CDC out of town. But the Prince never even mentions this. The only other person that does is Maximilian Strauss. LaCroix is too concerned with his own power to even worry about doing his job, taking care of the city. And you can assume that he isn't the only bad apple in the bunch. But just like everything in the game, there's another side to this. You can imagine without the Masquerade and the threat of consequences that there would be a lot of people looking to use that situation to their advantage. Maybe a new group would just rise to power in their place. Maybe they would break the Masquerade so poorly that they would give away the entire secret, and suddenly the modern world and the mortals have a war on their hands. The TTRPG and the game both sort of allude to the fact that the Camarilla likes the Anarchs where they are, quietly revolting and scoffing at the authoritarians above them, but not truly really doing anything. Ironically, elders grudgingly afford Anarchs some degree of status, due to the Anarchs' ability to obtain power in spite of the elders' opposition. They both also allude to the fact that the Anarchs really have no plan if they were to revolt, or at least they can't agree on what a Camarilla-less future would look like. They are united by the fact that they don't like the current situation, but not by what the future would look like. This extends to the Brujah idea of a utopia. A common Brujah theme involves the foundation of a kindred utopia, or the recreation of a mythical one from nights past, though each Brujah vampire has a different idea of what said utopia is. But you could easily see why someone would side with the Anarchs. First of all, they have a cast of charming and interesting characters. Damsel, the closed-off and mistrusting hothead. Smiling Jack, the laughing and generally happy advocate for chaos. Nines, the humble leader with the duty thrust upon him. And Skelter, the sort of conspiracy-headed enforcer. You like this group of people, and they're generally nice to you. They take care of you, help you out. Jack assists you when you don't even have a sire to teach you the ropes. Nines saves your life. And the idea that the Camarilla is oppressive isn't exactly hard for a player to get behind, especially when the idea of an impressive rule isn't really that far from people's minds at any given time. But why would you ever side with the prince? At first, I didn't think anyone really would. I couldn't even entertain the idea that, outside of making a specifically evil character, that you would ever want to take the side of LaCroix. But when I thought about it a bit more, it's not exactly out of the question. LaCroix doesn't really represent the Camarilla, not truly. That's more Maximilian. He is the real Camarilla, working quietly in the background, letting the boy prince have his tantrums, but secretly plotting just behind him. LaCroix is a representative of a new power. And this moment in LA isn't just a choice of Camarilla or the Anarchs, but will they let this new power take control? Because there is easily a world where LaCroix wraps up the LA situation and becomes a bit more respected in the Camarilla for bringing the Anarchs to heel. Slowly, over time, he gains power and eventually survives long enough to become an elder, scheming his way to the top, possibly even by diablerie. So the player isn't given the choice of supporting the current institutions, but hitching a ride on and even supporting a new one. Proving ourselves to LaCroix and getting in good with him surely would actually spell a knife in the back down the line, or literally getting blown up by a mass of C4. But if Jack wasn't one step ahead, maybe it means power down the line. Maybe it also means safety. There's a complacency behind this choice, because revolution means uncertainty and possibly war. And choosing to side with Maximilian is the full version of this. Instead of Los Angeles dealing with their problems on their own, you decide we're going to go tell mom and dad and have them handle it. This is then assumingly giving the Camarilla more of a foothold in the area anyways. The only choice I can't see many making is the Kwai Jin. The Kwai Jin are despised by almost every group in LA, every group in the Kindred world. They're seen as outsiders, and though they are supernatural, they are not Kindred. It's like siding with the werewolves. It's making the same choice as the go your own way option, but instead choosing to have the power of the Kwai Jin behind you. But they aren't really behind you, they're just using you to get their own foothold in LA. There was a poll done a couple of years ago on the Vampire the Masquerade subreddit, and despite the poll not including all the ending options, most people chose Anarch or Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf seems to be one of the most attractive options because the political situation is so complicated here. Choosing to go your own way really does complete the circle in the end. It's sort of in the spirit of Smiling Jack, who was the one who ushered us through this world at the beginning of the game. Why not carry on that chaos in the finale as well? I think if I was really pushed to pick a best ending, I would definitely choose the Anarchs. I think they're the most interesting ending, and choosing to let them take control back of their city, to turn LA back into an Anarch-free state, is really justice in the end. I also just want to point out here the beautiful subversion that is what's actually in the sarcophagus. Throughout the whole game, this mystery box is presented to us. We are given ample reason to believe that there might actually be an antediluvian in there. At a certain point, I even thought it would be a mummy, since there is another World of Darkness game called Mummy. There's hints towards the amount of power in the area, in the feeling that many talk about as we enter town. But in true Vampire the Masquerade fashion, this is just a false reading. Unreliable narrators and essentially seeing what we want to see. Because at the same time, the game gives us just as much evidence to the contrary. There's a full conversation that we have near the end of the game with the professor where he straight up gives us the answers. He says this is most definitely an ancient king and explains all of the iconography on the shell of the artifact. All of this turns out to be true, but because he's just a human, we assume that he knows nothing. The most obvious answer to what is in the sarcophagus is exactly what we would expect, an ancient and long-dead king, and that's exactly what is inside. But because we're in the world of the supernatural, we just assume this can't be the answer, and then are surprised at the ending. But the subversion isn't the only part that makes the reveal special. It's the fact that this is a larger representation of the world of darkness and the political situation at hand, specifically relating to LaCroix. The prince spends the entire game looking for the artifact. He assumes that this will be his one-way ticket to a higher rung on the ladder, more power, more control. But it's the subversion of his expectation as well. Just because he wants to see power where he expects it to be doesn't mean it's actually there. And there's a good reason that people in LA have been feeling something strange in the air, some sort of power shift on the wind. This is probably most likely because Cain has arrived in town, the father of all kindred, the one that started the curse. The original vampire would certainly cause a lot of people to feel something in the air. The point here is that the answer was right in front of our eyes, and the people that were eager and desperate risked it all for a chance to seize power, and got nothing. On first glance from the outside looking in, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines doesn't seem like anything special. It looks like standard fare for a first-person RPG. Hell, maybe the setting is interesting, but nothing really past that. But Bloodlines, from the inside, is one of the most unique games I've ever played. Even being a game based around vampires is unique. Barely any vampire games get made these days. You had Legacy of Kain, that vampire game, and I give like half a point for Vampire Survivors just because it has vampire in the title. Vampire video games are already rare, but Bloodlines doesn't just make a vampire game. It makes a realistic vampire world, translating the TTRPG almost perfectly into a fantastic RPG. This world is a whirlpool, sucking you in almost immediately with a tidal wave of force. You are powerless against its thrall, pulled under and drowned in information, character, and atmosphere. It's almost suffocating how good it feels to walk the streets of LA. Most of the characters that we interact with are memorable as well. They stick out in your mind, even if it's just a short interaction. Maximilian Strauss is barely in the game unless you play as a Tremere, and he's kind of an iconic character. His lack of presence, in fact, makes him more mysterious and intriguing. A large part of how good these characters are is in the writing. Brian Mitsoda, Leonard Boyarsky, Chad Moore, TJ Perillo, and Jason D. Anderson all had some hand in this. Mitsoda was the lead writer and shares the bulk of the responsibility here, but damn near every interaction is engaging and interesting. The game strings you along from the moment you're turned, leaving little breadcrumbs of lore and information to keep you going. You want to know more. You want the secrets to be revealed. But around every corner is another mystery, another term in this lingo that you're not familiar with. In a way, Bloodlines is about learning a language, a dangerous language that was hidden from your character their entire life, existing just beneath the surface. And so much effort was put into this game. I can't even imagine how this was made in such a short time period. There are specific dialogue lines for each clan, not to mention an entirely different list of dialogue specifically for Malkavians, a completely different gameplay mechanic for the Nosferatu. On top of that, the outcomes in the game are insane. There isn't a ton of variety in the actual quests that you take on. Essentially, each playthrough can contain all of the side quests and the main quests, but the outcomes of those quests are wild. The sibling rivalry quest, for example, between the Vorman sisters, has an interesting way of determining your relationship with them. Your relationship with both needs to be above a certain level to actually get them to hash out their differences. Each of the women have a variable associated with them. Each time you make a positive comment towards them, that variable is increased, and each time you make a negative comment, it decreases. Bloodlines is an ocean. It has so much depth, and you could explore this game for easily 100 hours, if not more. There's a reason that people keep coming back to this game, that people have been demanding a follow-up for ages now. But there's a reason that the game didn't get much attention sooner. On release, the game was a huge financial failure. It released too close to Half-Life 2, and no one was really interested in this sort of buggy RPG that kind of asked a lot of its players. Critics mostly enjoyed it, but once again, the recommendations came with the caveat that all of Troika's games did. It's a good game, but it isn't optimized. Bloodlines was just lost in the shuffle, and Troika Games was forced to shut down soon after. They had a few pitches and prototypes, but no takers on the publisher end. The game would gain a massive cult following over time, but the Vampire the Masquerade series wouldn't be revisited in video game form until years later, when Paradox bought the rights to the series. But we'll talk about that next time. Bye, Dad. Hey Dad, thanks once again for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe. I really enjoyed making this one, and I'm super excited to talk about the second Vampire the Masquerade game because I have a feeling it's going to be a doozy. But I was really inspired making this video, and I've been loving this world and just diving into the lore and all these different pieces of information. If you want to support the channel further, you can support the Patreon and be added to this list of amazing people right here. I post monthly media reports over there where I list off all of the media that I consumed for the month and talk about it. So head over there and tell me what you've been consuming as well. Thanks again for watching. See you next time. Bye, Dad.